Hello and welcome back to I Create For You. We got another spooky Yellowstone story and it's called The Miner's Ghost and it's based in Cook City. When I heard there might be gold on the Crow Reservation, I packed up my gear, my mule, and my dog Rex. We headed for the Absaroka Mountains. A few prospectors got to the narrow mountain valley ahead of me and were already panning, but I put up a cabin and started building sluice boxes pretty quick, hoping to strike it rich. I got lucky in the autumn and found me a promising vein of silver just before I had to quit mining to stock up on victuals and cut hay for my mule so we could make it through the winter in my remote cabin. The snows came down early from the mountains, and they were heavier than I'd seen before. I had to tunnel my way out to the barn to take care of old Bessie. My cabin was pretty much buried, but the piled up snow kept it warm and snug. When spring came, we broke free of the dad-blamed snow, and I started digging myself a mine, following that vein of silver. I figured I'd be rich by summer, but the silver vein petered out, and it was back to square one for me and old Rex. Meantime, a group of prospectors came to the valley that spring and set up their claim a few miles away. And gosh darn it, them prospectors found gold. Jiminy, but I was mad. A feller named Adam Miller filed the first official mining claim in 1871, and the whole area quickly became known as the New World Mining District. I filed my claim right after Miller, nice and official. By then, I'd found a big lead deposit, and it was a sight more profitable than the little sliver vein I'd originally pursued. That same year, a feller named Pete filed a claim next to mine, and we got friendly. Pete was always hankering after gold, and he fussed about the lack of it whenever we met. Still, he was doing well for himself, mining lead, same as me. Several years slid by in a heartbeat. Suddenly it was June of 1877, and folks in our mining town were all agitated about a band of Nez Perce that had started a war against the white man. The Nez Perce were seeking revenge for crimes against their tribe, including the murder of relatives and the loss of their homeland. Can't say I blamed them for being mad. I'd start a war too if folks killed my family and threw me off my claim. I knew better than to voice my views in the town, though. Folks were real scared. Pete stopped by my cabin one evening in July with the latest report from the settlements. I hear the Nez Perce have left the Idaho reservation, he said, setting himself on the wood bench by my front door and lighting his pipe. A huge band of them are on their way to Montana buffalo country, and at least 200 men and about 550 women and children. Not good, I said, rubbing the old Rex behind the ears. Folks in town say Nez Perce are heading to Crow country. They've got friends among the Crow who might help them fight the army. I sat bolt upright at this news. Crow country was just over the mountain from here. Are you thinking about pulling out? I asked, feeling my stomach sink at the prospect. Heck no, I'd never leave my claim. Just thought I should warn you, Pete replied. I was jittery all that night, wondering what I would do if the Nez Perce came through this valley. The warriors had been pretty ruthless to the white settlers living along the Snake. They wouldn't hesitate to kill a miner that lived alone on his claim. After some thought, I decided to disguise the entrance to my little mine, make it look as if it had been abandoned. I spent several days planting shrubbery and arranging a fallen log in front of the entrance. I even planted sagebrush over the debris piles to make them look overgrown. By the time I finished, the Nez Perce could have walked right past the mine without seeing it. I hoped. Each morning I'd move the fallen log to let Bessie in with the rubber wagon. Each evening I'd put it back just in case. It was a right pain in the nether regions, but it was better than having my ore stolen by the Nez Perce. There wasn't much I could do to hide my cabin or Bessie's stable, so I carved a hidey hole inside the mine with a rock cover to disguise it, and put my fiddle and the spare rifle and the box containing Mama's wedding ring on a high shelf inside. Then I hollowed out a stable for Bessie and moved a stack of hay inside. The animals and I would retreat to the mine if Nez Perce raided this region on their way to the Crow Reservation. On August 1st, the ground shook from the force of an explosion over Pete's claim, followed by the ear-splitting roar of falling rock. Quicker than lightning, I unhitched Bessie from the mine wagon and rode the mule over to Pete's place to make sure he was all right. Pete's mine had been buried by a massive stone avalanche. I looked around for Pete and saw the toe of one boot sticking out from underneath a boulder. I rode lickety-split to town to get help. It took 6 men to shift that boulder, and Pete's body was broken and bleeding when we got it out. We buried Pete behind his cabin and said a few words over his body. It was real sad. A few days later, U.S. soldiers staged a surprise attack against the Nez Perce encampment at the Big Hole River. The newspapers reported 60 Nez Perce dead, mostly women and children, and 25 U.S. casualties, with another 38 soldiers wounded. Sentiment was running high against the Nez Perce, who were attacking ranches and freight teamsters as they fled toward Yellowstone. Everyone in the region was in a panic, and the newspapers were fanning the flames. By late August, the Nez Perce had entered West Yellowstone and were slowly making their way toward the Madison and Firehole rivers. I carried my gun everywhere, and all my valuables were in the hidey hole way back in the mine. When I brought Bessie to town for shoeing, the blacksmith told me that 9 people had been captured in a Yellowstone tourist party, and 10 in another. He was thinking about sending his wife back east to stay with her family until the danger had passed. I couldn't blame him. A few days later, we learned that all but 2 of the Yellowstone tourists were freed and managed to escape, suffering minor wounds. Everyone in town was in a tizzy by now. Rumors flew around the mining camp. The Nez Perce were heading up the old Bangkok Trail. The Nez Perce were in Pelican Creek, heading toward Lamar River. A hysterical teamster came barreling into town one morning to report a rear guard of Nez Perce warriors had run into more Yellowstone tourists and had killed 2 of them. And they burned a ranch, he added, crossing himself with his hat. After hearing this news, folks in town that had families to care for closed up shop and hustled their loved ones to safety. The rest of us loaded up on ammo and stayed on our claims, ready to fight. I moved old Rex and Bessie into the disguised mine along with all our victuals and bedding. Then I tossed leaves around the cabin floor and blocked the chimney with sagebrush to make sure it looked as if I'd abandoned my claim. Best to lie low until the danger passed. After a few tense days in hiding, I ran out of tobacco and coffee, 2 essential ingredients for survival, at least in my book. Leaving Bessie in her shaft stall, Rex and I headed down to the general store to stock up on supplies. The crowd in the store was filled with good cheer. The latest word was that the Nez Perce were heading toward Clark's Fork Canyon, with General Howard hot on their trail. They wanted to avoid us tough miners, boasted the shopkeeper. They knew we could take 'em. Sure we could. That's why everyone panicked, I thought, shaking my head over the follies of mankind. I bought supplies and headed home with old Rex at my heels. As I drew near my cabin, Pete's ghost appeared abruptly in front of me with a faint popping noise like a cork coming out of a bottle. The air swirled around as if he stood in the midst of a windstorm. Some of the swirling air flowed over me, chilling my skin and making old Rex growl nervously. I stared at Pete with my mouth hanging open, indistinctly raising my rifle. Not that it would do me any good against a ghost. The setting sun was shining through Pete's body, and I realized with a twang of terror that his feet were a good 6 inches above the ground. "Get into the mine right now," Pete exclaimed. "A Nez Perce scouting party is setting fire to my old cabin over the ridge. They'll be over here in a moment. Run." It took a moment for his words to register in my flabbergasted mind. The Nez Pierce were coming? Great God in heaven! Thanks, Pete, I gasped and ran like the devil with my dog at my heels. We slid through the bracken-covered entrance, leapt into the hidey hole, and rolled the concealing rock into place. In the darkness of the makeshift stable, I heard Bessie munching on her hay. Then war whoops resounded over the ridge. Nez Pierce warriors galloped into my cabin clearing with gunshots and shouts of triumph. Wood smashed as they raided my house, and I smelled fire burning. I swallowed and stroked old Rex to keep him calm. All at once, I heard the warriors talking outside the mine. I clutched my rifle when I heard the scrape of the fallen log as it was moved away from the entrance. Footsteps echoed down the main passage. They'll see Bessie and know that we're here, I thought in alarm. I grabbed the concealing rock with my free hand, ready to push it aside and start shooting. Then I sensed Pete's present in the hidey hole with us. His hand touched my shoulder, calming me. Wait, he whispered. I waited. The footsteps hesitated at the fork between the main shaft and a side tunnel that exited on the far side of the mountain. After a heart-stopping moment of consideration, the warriors turned down the side tunnel, away from Bessie and her hidey hole. 5 minutes later, Nez Pierce exited the mine and regrouped with their companions. I heard them ride away. Well done, Pete said, his voice echoing through the hidey hole. His hand squeezed my shoulder once more, then Rex and I were alone. Belatedly, Bessie panicked at the smell of smoke from the burning cabin. I calmed her before she injured herself and went outside to see if there was anything left on my property. A short cloudburst doused the worst of the fire, but I'd have to completely rebuild the barn. Still, we were all alive, which was the most important thing. The Nez Pierce tracks exited southeast in the direction of Dead Indian Hill, so I assumed the scouts had decided to rejoin their tribe at Clark's Fork. In the morning, I heard that the Nez Pierce scouts were accused of burning the gold mills, and stealing a shipment of silver bullion. I lost nothing of value in the unexpected raid, thanks to Pete's ghost. While I rebuilt my cabin and barn, the Nez Pierce, rejected by their friends among the Crow, made a run for Canada. A final battle near the Bear's Paw Mountain held off U.S. troops long enough for 60 women, 8 children, and 103 men to slip across the border and live among the Sioux under Sitting Bull, who had been there since the Little Bighorn campaign the year before. The rest surrendered with Chief Joseph on October 5, 1877. The Nez Pierce War was over. Wow, that was an interesting one. So I'll be trying to draw old Pete, the minor ghost. And while I'm drawing this, I'm going to tell you a little tidbit of info that might be interesting to you to know. They mentioned Sitting Bull in... Here, let me get you down before I start yapping. I'm forgetting where I'm at. Okay. They mentioned Sitting Bull in the story at the end there. And I have an interesting story about Sitting Bull my darn self. Well, actually, it's mostly Geronimo, but, Sitting Bull, too, since his name was brought up. I got the wrong pencil here. My grandfather was in the Army, and just so happened that he actually photographed Sitting Bull, and I have the negative. I wish I would have. I usually don't read the stories ahead of time too much, and if I would have seen that, I would have grabbed the negative to show you guys. If I remember, maybe I'll be able to show you in a post or in a short. Anyway, he kind of befriended Geronimo and took pictures of both of them. And it was when Geronimo was at Fort Sill in Oklahoma, and that's where I believe that he had met him, because my grandfather was stationed there during the war, and that's how he got to meet him and take his picture. It's pretty cool picture. I have the one of the original pictures like that too also. But yeah, it's a nice little piece of history. I couldn't believe that he even had the Sitting Bull that he took a picture of too. So it's just something, my heritage, that I know that, he was able to make friends with both of those famous Native Americans. Yeah, I'm gonna have to see if I can get those pictures to show you guys. And people think it's weird that how could your grandfather? I mean, you don't seem like you're old enough to have a grandfather that old. My grandfather was born in 17. What was it? 17. Good Lord, I can't even remember when it's 1700s. 1790 something. And when he married my grandmother was only 13 at the time, and she was from the Philippines, where he was stationed there. He had married my grandmother's aunt, and when she had passed, when his wife had passed, my grandmother's aunt had passed away. Before that, he had promised to take care of her. So they weren't blood related. It was just, that he had. It was just someone that he. Hold on a minute. My cats are going crazy. Okay. Yeah, it was just. He decided the best way to do that was to marry her, so he did. And I believe she was only 13, going on 14 when he married her in the Philippines. And so then they immigrated over here with my grandfather. So that's a little bit of a story behind my family. But yeah, so I'm glad I have some of that history, because that's just awesome to know that my grandfather befriended Geronimo and Sitting Bull. But yeah, my grandmother was born in 1900, and I don't know how old my grandfather was when they got married, off the top of my head. But yeah, she was only a little thing when her, because she was living. I guess my grandmother's aunt took her in, and they were raising her, because her parents passed away, so she was left to be raised by my grandfather and his wife. And so then he just promised his wife that he would make sure she was taken care of. And that's how my heritage was formed. my family. So, it's quite a story. I still have all his army paperwork too. Thank goodness. Those are things worth preserving. And I totally forgot when I lived in Oklahoma. I wanted to take that um, picture of Geronimo. I wanted to take over there to his where he had, they actually had the jail where he was kept and everything, and I think they have like a little place where you can go in and see everything. I was there at where his grave was. He's not buried there anymore. They had moved his body, but they'd still have a memorial grave there, and I got to see that, and they did have like a little place where you could go to see where he was held captive on at Fort Sill, and unfortunately, when we went over there, it wasn't available for you to go in and check it out. So I didn't get to see that. Unfortunately, that would have been something nice to see. I'm just glad I got to see, like where he was, where his memorial tomb was. And actually, I don't know where they moved him to. I haven't looked into that, but he was actually, I actually have pictures of his his children, Geronimo's children, some of them, and his wives, because I believe he had more than one, and I have all that, pictures of all of them too. Alrighty, here is Pete. Oh God, I hope you guys got to see it. Here is Pete, the prospector, the one who saved that guy's life in the mine, and even though he lost his life earlier. But, and you got a little bit of my history. Alrighty. Well, thank you again for stopping by and listening to the spooky Yellowstone story and a little bit of my history and watching me illustrate Gold Miner Pete. And hope you like it enough to give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't, because I have plenty of more stories to go through, and comment if you'd like. I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any other questions about what I had talked about or the story. And I hope to see you guys in my next video. Bye bye for now. Thank you so much for stopping by.